Have you ever wondered what it really takes to set out, venture off, and continue to make healthy progress over the journey of a lifetime? Together, Mary and I invite you to join us on a journey to explore this question about where does lifelong health begin? Our journey and our travels will take us back a few decades and also upstream, so to speak, as we think about how health forms and flows. We'll talk about how science has changed our ideas of health over the last few decades, and we'll share a story of a groundbreaking research study that was conducted in the 1990s, which has come to be known as the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs study. Over the last few decades, this scientific discovery is really transforming the way we think about and prevent and treat many kinds of chronic illnesses. And moreover, it's also transforming our understanding of the biology of stress and the countervailing power of resilience that we can bring into healing for children and adults all across the lifespan.
The ACEs study gave us a roadmap, and that roadmap includes two really important concepts. They're currently being taught at schools all around the world. Those are mindfulness and meditation. I'd like to invite you to join with me in a short breathing mindfulness exercise. We're going to take 3 deep breaths in, and we're going to breathe in optimism and our hopes for the day and curiosity. And then I hope we're going to breathe out anything negative, anything we want to let go of. So will you join with me in 3 deep breaths?
So with that breath and our energy, we'll start our travels now, and we'll head upstream and think about health. Truly, every individual's life health journey is unique. But for today's conversation, and for illustration purposes, let's imagine 2 very contrasting community environments and consider their effects on health for those who live in the communities. Keeping with this river analogy, take a look at the 2 different river streams that you see here. And think about what you observe that may be factors impacting the health of those who live in those communities. Certainly, one of the communities appears to have evidence that it's maybe more benevolent kind of community. You notice green spaces, a village out in the distance, individuals out and getting fresh air, walking and running. Whereas in contrast, the other community shows some evidence of possibly poorer air quality. You may notice that there's pollution running into the river and some evidence of substance use or disease. But do we really know what's happening in the lives of the people living in those communities? Take, for instance, the 2 pregnant women. One is on the cell phone. Might she be experiencing stress? Or perhaps could she be connecting with a birth coach who's helping her prepare and keep informed and educated so she can have a healthy pregnancy? On the other hand, the mother who's alone and holding her tummy with baby forming inside, might she be experiencing a peaceful moment? Or could she be feeling alone and isolated in a rural community with no supports to help her through her pregnancy journey? And the 2 children holding hands, how are they being cared for? The findings from the ACEs research study have really challenged us to think differently and to look deeper, because the ACEs study revealed that adverse childhood experiences can happen across all demographics and all communities, not only in communities that may also be experiencing other environmental health challenges. So we've learned a lot over the years about the way that our environment truly does affect our health. And one of the factors that we've come to know is that our experiences are situated in these environments where we live, eat, learn, work, and play. And with so many advances in technology and neuroscience and genetics and psychology, our medical models have changed as well, and really begin to see both wellness and illness are states along a continuum, and there are many factors that can shape and determine our wellness as well as our illness. So we're clearly able to see now that nature and nurture are intertwined very closely. Health stressors may be environmental, as I mentioned. They may also be biological or psychosocial, but our surroundings really do play as big influencers. In fact, researchers working in the fields of epigenetics and epidemiology now assert that our zip code may be a very important determinant in shaping how our genetic code actually develops and then is transmitted to the next generation. This idea of our experiences from the very earliest time when we're developing in the womb and thinking back to the adults and the children in the picture that we looked at moments ago is really fundamental to understanding how health forms. And it's important that we begin to shift our question about what is happening in people's lives where they live. What stresses may individuals be experiencing? And how are adults and parents living in different kinds of communities, even in our different kinds of communities here where we live, how are they being supported with resources so they can ensure safe and nurturing and supportive developments and relationships for their children as they grow? And it begs the question is, what is our root system for our environment that we prepare for supporting children's healthy growth and development? So the ACEs research study has really allowed us to come to know that children's experiences from the earliest moments, which are situated in community environments, form the basic stimuli for their brain architecture to develop and for their physiology to develop and thrive as they grow. And that sets a set point and foundation for their entire lifetime. So how did this discovery come about? Well, Mary is going to share some great information about the actual ACE study, how it was conducted, what the findings were, and most important, why this may be one of the most important public health discoveries of our time, or maybe all time.
So here are the two physicians who developed the original ACE study. Dr. Vincent Felitti was studying obesity at a clinic in California, while Robert Onda was studying smoking cessation at the CDC. A doctor who knew both of these physicians decided to connect them because both of their interests was, why do people, in the face of knowledge that these are unhealthy behaviors, stop doing them while they're in a clinic situation or a trial, and then resume them when they know that these are unhealthy? So what ended up happening was they decided to survey over 17,000 people. And in that survey, which was an exhaustive questionnaire, they asked questions about health and also circumstances of childhood. When these respondents returned their results, they compiled them and created a vast list of correlations. We know because we have the 760 pages of research. So when that came back, they decided to distill it into 10 questions. And those 10 questions are what became the ACEs survey. Those results are stunning. Almost 2/3 of the people reported at least one ACE. Of that group, 87% reported more. So they're highly interrelated, and we know that. But we also learned through the study of epigenetics and advancements in that science that experience is inherited. Previously, it was believed that only physical characteristics or attributes could be passed down generation to generation. But the study of epigenetics and advances in brain science have created our understanding that experience is also inherited. Now, high ACE scores or our life experiences don't change the genetic code, they change the way it's read. So much in the same way that our environment shapes our genetics, so does experience. So as a community, we have to decide that the question is going to become not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. ACEs are common. The methodology of the study, there were 3 categories in those 10 questions. The first is household dysfunction. And so the question became, from the birth to the age of 19, in the home where you grew up, was there substance abuse? Were your parents separated or divorced? Did a family member have mental health issues? Did you witness domestic violence? Was anyone incarcerated or have trouble with the law? The second category is neglect. Were you emotionally neglected or physically neglected? And the last third category is abuse. Were you emotionally, physically, or sexually abused? So ACE scores in this survey range from 0 to 10. There isn't any weight given to severity or frequency. It's just 1 point for every positive response. Now, I want to make sure we have a solid shared understanding. When we talk about this kind of abuse, we're not talking about disappointment at not making the baseball team or the occasional spanking. We're talking about children who are growing up with constant elevated levels of stress hormones. So here's what we know. When the survey was done, we looked at behaviors and health outcomes, both physical and mental health. And the survey showed elevated ACE scores that correlated to health conditions. So this slide represents a person who's reporting an ACE score of 1. I want to remind you that that's 2/3 of the people in this room. Okay. Now, this slide, as compared, is for people with ACE scores of 4 or more. So we see the increase in the incidence of, for example, the orange bubble, alcoholism, the yellow bubble, depression, and the blue bubble, suicide attempts. Green is cancer. The other color yellow is drug abuse. So this represents a dose-response relationship, which is basically a public health term that suggests that the more gas you put in the car, the farther you can drive. The higher the ACE score, the higher the incidence of these health and mental health conditions. So the statistics don't lie. I like to quote my favorite physicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson. You can have your own opinions, but you can't have your own facts. So along with increased rates of serious disease, high ACE scores also correlate to addiction, lower academic attainment, productivity loss, criminal behavior. Now, I really want to make sure we all understand how the brain doesn't adapt. So when we're born, everything we need to survive is way back here in the back brain. It allows us to suck, it allows us to breathe. And as we develop and life experience happens, that development moves to the midbrain and to the prefrontal cortex. We saw on fixed slides before ours. And what happens to children who have elevated levels of adrenaline and cortisol is that it literally interferes with this development. Now, as everyone knows, this is the seat of executive function and decision making. In women, this tends to be fully developed, could be as young as 18, 19, up to say 24. Men are a little later. That's just the way the body works. So the prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision, executive function, hasn't fully developed, and we're asking these young people to make decisions. This is never going to develop with this level of stress hormone. So basically, that's a brain injury. Let's just consider for a moment the importance of this slide. It shows us 5 areas where the CDC has estimated the cost of treating child maltreatment. These are just 5 of the areas: criminal justice, child welfare, special ed, healthcare, and productivity loss. When we make these presentations around communities, depending on the group we're talking to, one of those might be more important to the group than others. But when you look at that combined cost, how can we go forward and not do something about this? Now, children with high A scores are not doomed to poor life outcomes. The science does not support that. It's the interest of family, grandparents, siblings, coaches, teachers, physicians, and nurses. Everyone in the community can make a difference. Now, that caring and competent interest is the one thing that is always identified in the research. That can change a life's trajectory. And for many of us, it has. And that will continue to be true. I want to remind you of 2 things. The first is, the study is not about impoverished communities. These statistics are very, very much across the middle. So this is us. This is all of us. ACEs occur in all sectors of our society. Now, healthy communities, self-healing communities, are going to always look for ways to mitigate the effects of ACE scores. We must, because the cost is just simply more than we can bear.
So when we as individuals seek help and support to maintain our wellness, many of us, when we go to our physicians or even our dentist, it seems like everywhere we go now, we have our vital signs checked. You know, our respiratory rate, our heart rate, our blood pressure, we can get it checked in the grocery store. But the American Academy of Pediatrics has just proposed and is beginning to implement a new 4th vital sign: relationships. And this is based on, in many ways, the ACEs information and the ACEs research and what that has shown to us, and also this abundance of robust evidence that supports the importance of a social connection in individuals' lives, and the importance of making sure that we look across our communities to ensure that there really aren't individuals or groups that are feeling isolated. Some physicians are beginning to inquire more with their patients about what's happening in their lives. And we're seeing such innovations as health navigators that in many cases are being prescribed to help individuals connect with resources. Here in northern Michigan, there are communities in schools that are positioning the health resources in a health home in with schools so that families and with children can connect with those resources. Ann Maston of the University of Minnesota has a great TED Talk called Ordinary Magic, and she also has a book where she uses this term ordinary magic to describe this vital importance of relationships, that they really are truly the protective factors that shape our health and development, and they are nested and rooted in experiences and in environments that are connected to support children's earliest growth and their development over the years. So when we think about our community and this way of moving from adversity toward building resilience capacity, it's really much more than thinking about implementing supports and programs that are maybe crisis intervention focused to help kids and adults bounce back. But rather, it's about creating strong roots and responsive systems all across our community, from schools to hospitals, recreation, you name it, that focus on ways to prevent trauma and stress before it occurs in people's lives, and for providing accessible ways to resources for everyone. So it's our job to ensure that every one of us is connected to a health home and has supportive, competent relationships in their lives to support their health. The isolation of individuals and the silos in the way that we try to support and deploy resources is just no longer appropriate in a community that is building its root system for resilience. And so by positively embracing this idea that every single one of our childhood stories matter immensely for our health, yours, ours, our elders, and even our children who have yet to come. That when we embrace that idea, we start to approach each other differently, with more understanding, with more compassion, and with more intentionality in the way that we come together and get things done. And so in that way, we're not bouncing back, we're bouncing forward.
So we all know what the threads are that hold a community together. It's our schools, it's our libraries, it's our community centers and cultural centers and faith communities and law enforcement and healthcare. The list is long. If we were all to be trauma-informed, if we were all to treat people in a way that recognized that they might be coming to us, might not be coming to us in the very best place, we would give them so much more respect. And we would allow ourselves to treat people more consistently and more compassionately. So ACEs education is underway in our area. The ACEs initiative in Northwest Michigan is partnering with many local organizations to provide ACEs education. We all have the opportunity to reduce ACEs on a daily basis. We can just be nicer when we're in the line at the post office. We can be the cooperative person in the alternating merge during the Cherry Festival, right? Any little thing that makes it just a little bit easier for someone else. Nobody knows whose dog died that morning, right? So just by being kinder, just by being gentler, and by creating a self-healing community, by reacting in a trauma-informed fashion. So I'd ask you to consider the wisdom of the Hopi elder who told us, we are the ones we've been waiting for. If not us, then whom? And if not now, then when? Thank you.